Friends, today is Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, and I'm going to read to you the first four verses of one of the most powerful Psalms in the Bible. This is David speaking, and it's generally understood that he's speaking at the crisis point of his life. You may know that he had many crisis points. He had a point where, he was picked last as a potential king of Israel. At a point where he fought Goliath on the battlefield. He had a point where, having served Saul, the king, he was rejected by Saul. He was hunted like an animal. He was driven away from his family. He was living in the wilderness. These were crisis points. But the most important spiritual crisis point of him was long after that, after he had ascended to the throne, done an amazing job as king, helped to lead the worship of God, helped to write the Psalms, because he was a musician and a poet as well as a king and a warrior. And he had been a tremendous success as a king. But that point where he committed adultery with Bathsheba and then had her husband killed in the battle was the spiritual low point of his life. And when he was confronted by the prophet Nathan, who said, "You are the man who has done these terrible things," he recognized this terrible thing. Undoubtedly, he was feeling guilt about it. And then he wrote this beautiful prayer of confession. And he said this: "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love. According to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. Cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions. My sin is ever before me." It's like the images of what he had done to Bathsheba and against her husband was constantly with him. "Against you and you alone have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. You are justified in your sentence and blameless when you pass judgment on me." This is the word of the Lord. Sundays, in our tradition, we have a collective prayer confession, and I write most of those. And so I am preparing prayers of confession, and I'm thinking about that theme. I wonder how often in the course of a week you take a moment to reflect, to assess your life, and to do some confession. That can be sometimes a painful thing, but when we allow the practice of confession to root in us, it's a very freeing thing. It's a liberating thing, because we're not carrying guilt. We're not waiting for Sunday to confess. Instead, we are taking moments when we have a twinge of conscience, when we recognize, I stepped out of bounds there. And we are immediately turning to you, immediately turning to people that we've offended and dealing with those issues. It means we experience what I sometimes call the incredible lightness of being. That sense of being unburdened, of my life being a life of uncomplicated joy and service, where God's grace is fresh for me. And so at each little moment when I'm inattentive or angry or selfish or lazy, I am trying to learn how to turn toward God in those moments. And so that's why the Lord's Prayer is kind of a daily prayer. He reminds us of that by saying, "Give us our daily bread." We should be praying this prayer for forgiveness every day. When do you confess? What do you say? Let's take a moment and pray. Lord, I confess my frustrations with myself and with others today. I confess my self-indulgence, my insensitivity, my stubbornness. Forgive me. As David prays later in this great prayer, Psalm 51 we've been looking at, "Restore unto me the joy of your salvation." We ask it in his name. Amen.